topic is money in ancient Greece. However, do not be confused by said topic. As an economist, I'm more interested in what ancient Greece has to tell us about money and the economy rather than what happened in ancient Greece. So there are a whole series of questions that we're going to be looking at today. The first one is extremely basic. What is money? It's a kind of an abstract concept that very few people can actually define properly. The second reason is how do we use and why do we use money in the way that we do? We use it as sort of a means to exchange, but there are other things we can do with money. Arguably, the most important question is what is the relationship between the role between money and the state? I'm going to argue in this talk that it is impossible to have a functioning currency that will last for a long period of time without a state. And to answer these questions, we're going to look historically. How and why was money introduced? How did it take off? Why did it take off? First thing we do is take a look at our dollar bill. I'm going to ask you, what is this dollar bill? What does it stand for? What does it represent? Anyone? Coca-Cola. You are using it as a, I'll get to the term specifically, but that actually is one of the uses. The point is, this dollar bill really isn't anything. After Nixon in 1971 cut us off the gold standard, this is just a piece of paper. It means really nothing. Without the three things that I highlighted. It's also this thing. The first one I'll draw attention to is this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. We're going to get to the proper term for this later. The second one is a stamp by the U.S. government signed by the Secretary of the Treasury saying this is valid for that. The third thing is a numerical number, $1, giving some value to an otherwise worthless piece of paper. So, money is a means of exchange. That is, I can use it as a tool to exchange one good for another using an intermediary. A method of payment, which is that you are forced to accept this by that message that says this note is legal for all debts. That if I owe you something, I can pay you with money. You can't say, no, I will not take money. The third one is a measure of value. This is much more Aristotelian, and we'll get to this in a minute. But money provides a method, or a means, for comparing to otherwise entirely different concepts. So if I am a doctor and you are a maker of roofs, and I need a roof and you need to have a doctor, we need some common way of valuing that 2 hours of your labor is equal to 1 hour of mine, etc., etc. And we use money as that intermediary step. Before getting to what happened to money, let's take a look at what happened before money. There's a system called Hackzuber, which is a great German term for hacked up silver, that was very prevalent in the Near East. And the Near East stood fine with that. Syria had great caravans, we had the Phoenicians had one of the greatest trading empires of all time, and they didn't have more currency. What they had is they had pieces of silver, as you can see, jewelry, that's part of a bracelet, that's part of a hair thing, and they chopped it up in little pieces, and each time you went to the market, you chopped off a little piece and you weighed it, and that was the proper amount, and then you got your stuff. And unfortunately, I couldn't find a picture of it, but the system did develop over time. The most advanced Hacksilver we find is actually like a Hershey's chocolate bar in little pieces. And since silver is a soft metal, you literally just go to the market, you can tear off a pre-measured section of it, hand it to the person, and get your chicken. The only problem with this is that since silver is such a soft metal, every time you work with it, every time you touch it, you're losing part of the silver. A little bit falls off. So there's a great deal of wear, and since silver is so valuable, that wear can add up very quickly, so that the more you use it, the more you lose. You also have the issue of cheating. Since there are scales that can be tinkered with and tampered with, you can also mix in, say, some lead or some other metals to make it heavier than it actually is. So you run a whole bunch of problems. Each time you have a transaction, you have to weigh it and you have to test it. And as Adam Smith will say, that the transaction costs are too high for any long-lasting cost. So let's go through just an overview of the history. The first one, as we saw, was this Hackzuber. The first true coinage, not counting China, China's debatable, it's more of an issue, or something. The Western world is coinage in Lydia. We will talk a great deal about that. We also have a record of Kypselos of Corinth, the first time creating coinage in Corinth. Unfortunately, the archaeological record doesn't back that up, but we'll get to that. The first coins we have in the rest of Greece are in Samos and Aegina, And within 100 years, coins are everywhere. It really takes off, and so we're really going to ask ourselves, why did coinage take off so quickly? Just as an aside, I'm assuming a little bit of background about knowledge of Greece, geography, stuff like that. If there's something that I say that doesn't make sense, please stop me and let me know. I'm going to have some maps to try to help things. So this is a map of all the Greek city-states during the classical era that produced coins. As you see, there are a fair number of them. But we should point out there are over 1,500 Greek city-states in Magna Graecia. This is nothing in comparison. So while coinage did spread, the number of cities that actually minted their own coins is fairly limited. We're going to get to why in a second. So, backing up, coinage first starts here in Lydia, in Sardis. So, why Lydia? We have two quotes from Herodotus that give us some clue. The first one, the Lydians, so far as we have knowledge, were the first nation to introduce the use of gold and silver coin, and the first who sold goods by retail. The use of gold and silver here is a little confusing because the Greek does not make it clear whether or not you have gold coins and silver coins or coins of silver and gold. In this case, electrum, which is the natural alloy of gold and silver, which they make their coins out of. So here he's linking, although not very explicitly, it's more a correlation that they introduced coins and they're the first people to actually have retail trade. Second thing he says, Lydia does not have many marvelous things to write about in comparison with other countries, except for the gold dust that is carried down from Mount Tumos. So, the three important things with Lydia is they have the coinage, they have gold in their river, or in this case electrum, and they invent retail trade. So let's take a look at this. They have a domestic supply of precious metals. And as we'll see in Greece, this is actually very rare. We think, oh, Athenian silver coinage. Well, they're the exception. There are very few places in Greece that actually have precious metals. So let's take a look at Lydian coinage. It's made from electrum, which is found in the river. I mean, I visited Sardis and I scooped up a little empty film can some electrum and brought it home. The problem with it, though, is it has an extremely variable ratio of gold and silver. So, as you see, the gold fluctuates quite wildly, and so does silver. And since gold and silver trade at different exchange rates with each other, that's constantly fluctuating, the value of a coin can change quite dramatically. So, that's Mount Tumulus, that's the Capitolis River, and this is a chunk of electrum, which doesn't look very pretty, but it's purified. So the very first coins you find are in the Artemisium in Ephesus, which is not in Sardis, but it's in the kingdom of Lydia, that are sort of buried under this temple. How they got there is a very interesting question. The coins themselves have a Lydian lion and a just pretty blank stamp on the other side. You have to understand that at this time, coins are not, they're all struck. They're not minted. So each coin, the guy measures out a little piece of electrum, puts something underneath it, puts the chisel on top, has a hammer, whack. So it's pretty dangerous, and it takes a lot of effort to make one single coin. So what do we find about these coins? So we find them in the Artemisium. We find many different denominations, going from 10 staters to very, very, very small coins, to I think up to 172nd to the state. So it's not yet at the point where you can buy a loaf of bread with it, because this metal is so valuable, but there's a wide range with which you can buy different coins. Here's the interesting thing, though. All these coins, when tested, have a nearly uniform proportion of gold, 54%. It's not the same range of metals that we saw in the actual natural electrum. So, what's going on here? The coins are intentionally debased with copper. But the state has come in, has mucked up the ratio to a fairly uniform standard. Now, why did they do this? First argument is that it removes uncertainty. That since I have this coin and I know that it has 54% gold. Period. I don't have to test it. I don't have to weigh it. I know that that's what it is. But you have to understand that this is the state minting these coins, and we'll get to why in a second. So the state gets to set what the ratio is. So if it sets that the ratio is 54% gold and then charges it as if it were 70% gold, the state is making a profit. And by diluting it with copper, you're taking a weight of electrum and fobbing it off for much more than it's actually worth. That's the profit. Now, there are various theories to why coin was invented, and most of these, I think, are ludicrous. The first one is to pay mercenaries. So you would give them a nice piece of electrum or gold or